Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Each episode, we bring you a fresh and insightful interview featuring one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. You can subscribe to our podcast on Google Play Music, iTunes, Stitcher, or on our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/The Director's Cut. And if you're enjoying The Director's Cut, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. We love hearing your feedback. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Robin Swicord's new drama, Wakefield. Adapted from a short story by E.L. Doctorow and starring Bryan Cranston and Jennifer Garner, Ms. Swicord's film tells the story of Howard Wakefield, a suburban lawyer with a loving wife and family. Though outwardly successful and happy, his inner feelings of suffocation lead Howard to snap and disappear without a trace. Hiding in his own garage attic, he survives by scavenging at night and spends his time secretly observing the lives of his wife, children, and neighbors. In addition to Wakefield, Ms. Swicord's credits include the feature film The Jane Austen Book Club and the short film The Red Coat. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Ms. Swicord spoke with Director Lesli Linka Glatter about filming Wakefield. During their conversation, Ms. Swicord discusses what inspired her to adapt the E.L. Doctorow short story into a feature film, how she was able to shoot the film at a blisteringly fast pace of only 20 days, and how her instincts led her to cast Bryan Cranston in the lead role.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie, and I am very honored to be talking tonight with the amazing Robin Swicord, who is both the writer and the director of this film. And I saw the film a couple of weeks ago and was really blown away by it, by the performance and by the point of view of being inside this one character. And Robin, I'd love to talk to you about where I know it's based on a Doctorow short story, but how that process came about.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here, Leslie. Leslie is somebody I've looked up to for so many years. It's really a thrill for me that she agreed to come and do this.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I approached E.L. Doctorow about the short story. I had seen it in the New Yorker in 2008. I loved it. Somehow I felt a kind of hook when I saw it. I actually had the weird experience of, when I was reading it, seeing film images and thinking that there had already been a film made of this short story, which didn't make any sense because it had just been published. So a couple of years after that, Elliot Webb, who had been an agent at ICM and became a producer, brought me a couple of E.L. Doctorow short stories and said, is there anything here for you? Is there something here that you would be interested in doing? And there was Wakefield. And I went, oh, my God, there's that movie. There's that thing I wanted to make into a movie. So he could introduce me. He knew Doctorow. And so he introduced me, and we started corresponding via email and talked on the phone some. Then I went to New York and met him, and he allowed me to kind of take the short story and run with it so that I didn't have to formally option it, but he agreed that, he signed a piece of paper saying that he wouldn't sell it to anybody else for a couple of years because they knew it would take a little while to get something as odd as this movie off the ground.
And it's such a unique story, and the way you've told it through, was very profound for me. I mean, having a story where one small thing happens, there's a power outage, and it changes your life forever.
The trigger incident, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so when you started to adapt it into a screenplay, I mean, you are both the writer and the director. So, how long did it take you to adapt it, and what was the process of moving this toward production? And was Bryan Cranston, what was the process of attaching him? I can't imagine any other actor playing this role after seeing the film.
I know. This belongs to Bryan. It's something that I knew from the very beginning, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But in terms of, writing it, I mean, I've written so many screenplays at this point that I don't have to labor for a really long time to understand, like, what am I making here? I had a very strong sense of the film that I wanted to make, and then I wrote that film. And so that process was more or less January 2012 to March 2012 to get a first draft.
Wow, but you've written for you.
But I've written, I've got writing muscles, so it wasn't, it isn't that I solved every problem. I still had a lot of questions. That was just draft one. That was just like, well, this is what I have, and so I showed it to Doctorow, and he gave me some of his thoughts. One of the things he felt that I had made a character who might be considered to be mentally ill, and he did not want that. He really very, very strongly felt that Howard Wakefield was a man in crisis, certainly, but that he had not, in a kind of conventional sense, become mentally ill. That he had gone to a place that any of us could go without actually literally losing our mind. And so I respected that, and I made very small adjustments. One of the adjustments that he suggested, I didn't actually do till the editing room, and he was so right. By that time, he was already gone. He died the summer before we started filming, and so I never got to call him up and say, "You were right about that, by the way." So after I had the script, I brought it to Deb Aquila, who now works for Lionsgate, but at that time, was available for casting.
And a great casting director.
Exactly. I've worked with her several times on movies that got made and movies that didn't get made. And so she was kind of my go-to person. Since she went to work for Lionsgate, I've now met Amy Lippens, who I think is also an incredible casting director, and she ended up working with me on this. But Deb made a very short list. I told her the kind of actor that I was looking for. She knew right away that we needed a real powerhouse person, somebody who wasn't afraid of taking a risk, someone who played the comedy part of it and also the serious part of it, and somebody who would be willing to come and do something that was this odd, a person who, as a kind of like cinephile in a way, this is, I can't think of another movie that's like this, so yeah, why not? So Brian was at the very top of that list. But the problem with going to him first, as my producers, who I gave it to Julie Lynn, who I'd worked with on the Jane Austen Book Club, and her partner, her business partner, Bonnie Curtis, and they said, well, this movie is probably between 3 and 5 million. I think that we have to be realistic about who we cast. I
want to ask all of these questions about production, because she made this on, and I think the movie looks incredible, and dealing with all 4 seasons. So we have to put that later, and I want you to talk about all of that.
I will. I'll talk about it. Yeah, it was. We ended up, as you'll see, shoestring. But at any rate, what Bryan Cranston was worth, quote unquote, in the open market, that is to say, the international sales market, was about $1.2 million at that time, and our first budget came in at about $3 million. And they said, so if you made this with Bryan Cranston, you're not going to shoot nights, you're not going to build your attic, you're going to be shooting practical locations, you're not going to get the seasons, you're going to probably have to set it in L.A. There were all these sacrifices that were on the table if I insisted on Bryan Cranston. And so I knew a couple of things. First of all, I knew that my friend Jay Roach had cast him already in Trumbo. And I had read the script for Trumbo, and I figured he's going to get a nomination for this. So, yes, you can take a minute. You can do some other explorations with other people that you think will bring us more. But in the back of my mind, I knew that we were going to go back to Bryan. And so it was really just an exploration. I don't think anybody else ever read the script, honestly, because if you are one of the few people that can get this movie, financed at the drop of a hat, if you're going to do an art house movie, you're going to do it with the Coen brothers. You're not going to do it with an unknown female director. And so I figured, well, we'll throw some sand down a rat hole for a while, and then I will go back to Bryan. By that time, maybe he will have won an Oscar. And so he did not win an Oscar. He got nominated. He did win the Tony for All the Way, which was the Broadway show that he was doing when I went to meet him, and he agreed to do the film for me. And he also, Breaking Bad opened in Germany. And all of a sudden, in terms of foreign sales, it was a lot closer to 3 million. And so we just had to figure out, how can we do that? how can we make this movie for not quite $3 million?
Wow. And so having the patience and knowing who you wanted, who you saw, and the instinct that, I mean, he's a brilliant actor.
Yeah, I mean, it's his role.
Trust your
Period.
instincts.
Yeah, exactly.
Always a good one.
Right, but also I had to listen to my producers. They worked really hard on this movie. And producers are truly, as we know, the unsung heroes.
Oh.
And so if what they said was, we're trying to make your life easier. And so we're going to try to get our life also to be easier. We have to do this exploration. So it's pointless to stick your sword in the sand and say, no, it's got to be this. You have to let everyone have their process. And that is why they call this a collaborative art form. They have to do their thing. Because at the end of the day, we ended up making this movie in 20 days.
That's incredible.
That is really hard when you are the producer.
So there's so much I want to ask about Brian and your process of working with him, but how did you make this movie in 20 days with the seasons? And was that a set that you built the attic, but...
Well, it's a lot of different pieces. And this is, the real story of how you do this in 20 days and get all the seasons and all of that is that you have to do an enormous amount of pre-planning. In a movie of this size, you get 4 weeks of paid pre-production. So there is a lot of other work that has to be done.
So you were working way ahead of that.
We were working way ahead in terms of problem solving.
But you had Janine Oppenwall. You had amazing people.
We had Janine Oppenwall. Yeah. And Janine Oppenwall, well, the truth is, not just Janine Oppenwall. I had
team.
The whole team. My whole team was incredible. When you shoot in L.A. and you have access to the crew base that is here, you get geniuses and miracle workers. That's who shows up. And a lot of my team actually had just come off of the Revenant, and they were looking to do something at home in December, January, which is when we shot. That meant they were home for the holidays. They wanted to be in the bubble of love after being through such a hard shoot on the Revenant. And that's
bubble of love.
That's what I could provide, believe me. We're a very happy set, in spite of us never sleeping.
The cast and crew screening, and it was a bubble of love. I have to say that.
Yeah. Well, on my first movie, Jane Austen Book Club, I'd been on enough sets with movies that I had written but did not direct, where I had seen the crazy happening. And I just knew that I had to hire the non-crazy.
Right.
That my litmus test was, are you loving? Are you kind? Are you sane? And do you know what you're doing? And if you didn't hit every one of those boxes, then I did not hire you. And so I had a really good team, and a bunch of people were available from that team who came and helped me again, particularly in props. Those are the people that were really available, were props. But also I had a lot of the same grips. They were fantastic. So technically what we had to do, because we had to create Connecticut, and we had to do it in Pasadena.
Right.
So we did not have a train. We soon realized there was not going to be a train. We were going to have to pretend there was a train. And my first AD, Kim Winther, who was a guy that worked with Roland Emmerich for a long time, for like 15 years, and he made, he sort of specialized in making movies that take place in 26 countries and that kind of stuff. So I actually needed a first AD that was that capable, who could make this happen. And he said to me, what about Traintown? What about going to Griff the Park to Traintown?
You mean...
We went to Traintown. That scene at the beginning when he's on the train.
God. I love it.
Those little cabooses that they let you have your birthday party in. Janine Oppenwall clad the outside so it looked like Metro North. There were no seats inside. She put 2 red seats. I had seen a photograph at MoMA once of people commuting with all these men in fedoras kind of pressed up almost against a window and a little child kind of trapped between the bodies. And I had that on my phone, and I went, that's how we're going to solve it. We're just going to crush people up against the window. We're going to shoot him. We'll put the camera on a gimbal. We did lights. We had all the little magic, gaffer magic going by. And everybody jiggled like they were on a train. And we got away with it. So that was the deal.
Did. Oh, my God.
And so that was the name of every single thing that we did.
Wow.
We found a house in Pasadena that was beautiful. It was surrounded by windows, so you could always be looking in. Inside that house was a lifetime's worth of collecting of beautiful objects and furniture. All we had to do was edit. We got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of production value out of this lady who lived in Pasadena who let us shoot in her house. Why? I can't imagine.
But thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Behind it was a garage that had a maid's quarters above, so it was crowded. There was a bathroom. There was a little kitchenette. You couldn't shoot up there. We couldn't demo that. That was not going to be our attic.
But was that the window?
Well, we put a window on
You put the window
We put a
in.
window on.
Yeah.
But then when you looked at the back of the house, what you saw was this very nice garden with a blank wall and a tiny clipboard-sized kitchen window. So the house was everything, except you couldn't see into it. You can see into every angle of that house, except from the back. And Janine Opperwald, production designer, and I stood there looking at this with my DP, who was a fantastic DP, Andre Bowden-Schwartz.
Yes.
I met him when he was in film school, when he was 19, and I stalked him for the next 10 years. He turned 29 on our set.
Wow.
And he is a brilliant DP. He was brilliant in college, and he just got better and better. So we stood there and we looked at it and just kept looking at it like as if we stood there long enough, a window would materialize.
And it did.
Well, we realized I had this one of these crazy ideas where I went like, you know what? That whole blank wall is like a movie screen. Why don't we can't project a window onto it, but we could migrate a window onto it. We could go shoot the window someplace else. We could put that on the back of this house. And that's what we did. We shot that kitchen in Altadena, and we migrated it in post. We shot plates, and we planned for it.
It's seamless. I mean, I would have never known that.
Yeah, Ivy Agrigan was our VFX
amazing.
person, and she was the one who was responsible for the Revenant, and she is incredible person to work with. And so she figured out all the logistical stuff. She found Russians who would help us do that part of it. In the editing room, my own editor, Matt Maddox, had spent 10 years doing VFX before he became an editor. And so he just did like a little mock-up of that with his own little afterworks toolkit, so that when we were editing, we could edit to something that looked kind of like what it was going to look like. But because we got that, there was a scene that was really important to me in the film, and we were not going to be able to get that because it required a company move. Because in all the little places that we were shooting, there was no place that had a basement where we could shoot the scene with the kids next door. And my producers, who were fantastic all the way, but they had to say things like this. And one of the things they said was, this is on the bubble for us. We don't know if you're going to get that scene because we don't have a place to shoot it. If we find another place and we can't shoot something else there, then that's a whole day, and we don't have a whole day. We only have 20 days. And so what happened when we found that house in Altadena that had the kitchen window is they had a basement. So we compressed all of that stuff, the night and the day shooting of Jennifer and the girls in the house. And then we had 2.5 hours to go downstairs and get that. And art department had to clean out that. I mean, no one had been. They just had stuff in there, and they made that happen overnight.
So speaking of that, which is incredible to hear, like how you pulled this off, in having a film that is so completely in one character's point of view, like everything, he's making up the dialogue for his wife and children, it's all about him and how he sees the world. How did you work with him on that? And Jennifer Garner, who did an amazing job, who we only hear his version of what she's speaking.
All right, so I'll talk about Jennifer first because I feel like in a lot of ways she's kind of an unsung hero. I think that she has been undervalued by the film business in terms of her acting ability. She's a phenomenal actress. I've always liked her. I think that because of the sort of tabloid fodder of her life, that she has been kind of turned into a celebrity without people noticing that she's actually an extraordinary actress. And she signed on to do this because she really wanted the challenge. She liked the idea of trying to put over a performance through 2 different layers of glass. And she works in a really precise way. She's very prepared. I wrote a shadow script for the house.
So she had a whole script.
She had a whole
what
script that had character arc, relationship arcs, for everybody in the house. And I even built in things to it so that the things that they are saying and doing in the house kind of run counter in some cases, and there's some ironic tension between what he thinks is happening and then what they're saying. But that was all for them. That's all for them to have the kind of deliciousness of that. So they would have something to really play.
Sure.
And Jennifer herself is a parent, and she just immediately bonded with Victoria Bruno and Ellery Sprayberry, who play their daughters. Right. And they made their own little family. So it was, for me, not hard to work with them. It was a matter, in some cases, just of modulating, of like, can you take that cross a little faster? Or I think you're maybe not quite as upset here as you are a little bit later, just sort of signposts like that. But she understood what she needed to do. And as long as they were playing what I had written for them, more or less, they didn't have to worry about hitting marks, where's my key light, not wearing a mic on your body. It was very natural acting because they were just doing human behavior and relating to each other and getting to play, in a sense, as if you were almost in an acting class together. And she found it to be great. She said, I could just do it, give me weeks of this. It's so kind of great. How she felt, I could just do this for weeks. But she also came and did stuff, was there sometimes for Brian to have a relationship to in certain kinds of key scenes to help him out. What he had to do was also kind of extraordinary. I'll talk a little bit about working with him, in terms of getting into the role and all of that, and then working with her to create the marriage. But I just want to point out that technically what he was having to do was look at a monitor that showed what was happening in the house.
I was going to ask, what was he looking at?
He was looking at a big monitor that, was like another thing I had to trade for with my producers to get playback on set, right, so that he could look at what he was going to be looking at. Because then once he went inside our little space capsule of a set that Janine had built for us, he had to go to the window and look out at a camera and a tape mark on a concrete wall and, all kinds of crappage, crappage, hanging down. And he had to then play in his mind what he had just seen. And I saw it, especially in the editing room, that there were times when he would lose the thread and he would reset. I would see different thoughts in his mind because he would have gone back to an earlier point in his memory of what they were doing. And then I would get another little mini take in there because of that, but he had to hold it all and give that performance. So it was an extraordinary feat for him to do that. And
so he wasn't watching, when he was doing that, he was not watching the video.
No, he couldn't, because monitors give off their own light, for one thing. And the other thing is, where would they go? The window is only so big and the camera's huge,
right.
So it was...
So he had to remember. Basically, he was playing...
He had to remember. And so I was off to the side giving him signposts as well. Sometimes I would whisper his voiceover stuff. We recorded that stuff 4 times at different times in production, so that I would always be harvesting his increasing understanding of what was going on with his character. So I knew the pace at which he was going to be taking it because I had listened to him. And so I would try to give him that pace so that he would know when to shift, when to shift.
He's alone so much of the movie, so you're basically dancing with him a
right.
lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was trying to feed him what he needed, and also setting up, this is what's just happened, this is where we're going from here. Because we were shooting in that way that Sidney Lumet often worked, where it was like, okay, everything that's in this light, we're going to do. So it's this scene, and it's this scene, know.
I see. So you weren't able to shoot chronologically.
No. I wish it would have made his life a lot easier, in the sense that he wouldn't have had to been in and out of so much
facial hair.
And I had incredible people who did the makeup. You may have noticed.
Yes.
Zoe Hay. I mean, seriously.
Amazing.
Zoe Hay did all the facial hair.
Wow.
She and Erin Kruger, she's got another name in there, but I always just call her Erin. I'm sorry to to be blanking. But anyway, Aaron was incredible, and they worked together in designing that, and Robert Wilson did the hair. So there were wigs and wig pieces, little wefts that he would weave in, because we didn't have the money to do a whole lot of different heads, But that was an extraordinary team. And Brian's face was raw from going in and out of cement, alcohol. And he has a sensitive skin anyway. But he was, he was game, and they were game. And I would say to them, okay, how long is this turnaround? And they would say 45 minutes. You could take that to the bank. So we would go and do whatever we could without him for those 45 minutes. And then, we would have him back, just like clockwork. They were phenomenal.
That's incredible. And then the few scenes, like the kids next door, were amazing.
Yeah. That was great. Isaac Leva is the boy.
Yes.
He was extraordinary. He came into our auditions. I saw a lot of really wonderful Down syndrome kids who were actors. All of them were actors.
Wow.
And there's a little community of people here that work with Down syndrome kids Glee used a lot of people, offered them a lot of work. And he had been on Glee as a kind of background person. He loved to sing. But he came in and put his hand on his heart and said, Herbert. And I mean, it was just, seriously, he had me at hello. I was just like, I did not want him to leave the room. I loved him so much. Yeah. So, and he's a very fine actor. He really prepares. He thinks it through. He has big emotional responses to his environment, to things that he's seeing around him. He's a sensitive, beautiful guy. And then Pippa Bennett Warner, Amy Lippman's brought me. She's an English, mostly stage actress, although now she's on Harlots, which is, a cable show. And she worked all the time. She works a lot in London, but she hadn't worked much here. And I had to audition her over Skype, which I do not recommend.
No.
I want to tell you. Yeah. But she worked as a local. She literally lived in my house for the week that she was here and was such a good sport about it.
That's so amazing. And so the process of working with Brian, was such an intimate one.
It was, because he works in this beautiful way. I mean, he's like a writer's dream come true. And I've actually wrote a little piece which is coming out and written by a magazine, which is the Writers Guild magazine, which will come out soon, which is about the strange thing of not allowing writers and actors to live in the same space in film. In theater, when you're theater trained, you're always working with actors because they constantly make your work better. So, I mean, Nick and I laugh about the fact that when we wrote Matilda together, that we heard casting tapes for the Trunchbull and immediately rewrote a bunch of Trunchbull scenes. The thing of being able to hear it aloud with an actor is everything. Huge. And it's not built in, So with Brian, he works very close to the text. He works through every moment, every image, every line of dialogue, questions, ideas. He pitches stuff. He's always improvising and thinking about stuff aloud, which is his way of getting down under the skin of the character. A ton of stuff that he suggested actually entered the film because he was so in tune with the character. So we built up a lot of trust doing that. And then I was worried about how do you make that marriage when we don't have any time really to rehearse, and how do you rehearse when you only have a couple of scenes where they're in the room together. And I had seen Afternoon Delight that Jill Soloway wrote and directed, and she had taken a little mini course, like a weekend course or something, with Joan Shekel, who is a person who teaches, I guess, directing and acting as well. And she taught this way of working with actors where you create relationships through these intimacy exercises. And so I went and I took that little course from Joan a couple of years before I ever, maybe 3 years before I ever directed. I think I just finished draft 1, and I thought, as soon as Afternoon Delight came out, whenever that was, I went over.
It won Sundance a few years.
Yes,
yeah,
it did. Maybe 2013 it was one. So I went and immediately took that thing, and I learned those exercises. And then I just went to Jennifer, and Brian said, I want to do this. And we got permission to do it in the house where they were going to be doing it, in the bedroom where they were going to have their fight. And it was great. And it involved just a lot of laying yourself bare, a lot of physicality, not in a kind of like, ooh, sexy way, but, just touching, smelling, looking, giving up that personal space between each other.
Because how do you
rapidly
create that relationship?
How do you get people very casually undressing in front of each other and fighting at the same time and not have it look stagey, So it was really valuable to have gone and taken that thing with Joan Shekel, because I could introduce them to it, and it gave them touchstones. So there were certain little phrases that they came up with in those exercises. So they go away, we shoot for 3 weeks, now it's time to do their scenes together. It's just an add water situation because they have the touchstones, and all I had to do was say those words aloud, and it brought them back to the memory of being in that room and doing this with each other.
That's so great. That's so great, because what a challenging film to be doing because of that, because they don't have a lot of time together.
Right, no time. I mean, seriously, that was their, quote, rehearsal.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're together then the very last scene of the film, which, of course, we don't see what happens after that. I'm like, no!
Yeah, I know. Well, I never gave Brian the shadow script. So he didn't know.
Okay.
All he knew is that he walks in the house. He didn't know what he was going to be seeing when he walked in the house.
Oh, that's amazing. So she had the script, but he did not have that script.
That's right. He still hasn't seen it.
That's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an amazing job, and what a fascinating process you went through to make it for the amount of money you had, and to make that an opportunity rather than something that was negative. Like, you had to find the way to make that work.
Right. That was the great thing about everybody on the crew. It was never, oh my God, we can't do this. It was, all right, okay, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to solve this? How are we going to do this?
Right.
It was that was everyone's attitude about it, and that's how you get it done. And it was they were really, I mean, honestly, there were some really crazy things that happened because of that. But we all survived it. Everybody's still alive.
That's right. Everyone's still alive, and there's something about being in the room with the smartest people you can be in the room with.
Yeah, I know. It was a blessing. I mean, I think everybody was. It's like when you go through something really, really terrible, you're all snowed in together on a train wreck or something, If you survive that, you just love everybody that you were in the train car with, So you had that.
So I'm getting the sign that we have to end. Thank you so much, Robin. It's such an incredible piece of work. And
thank you.
Bravo. And, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. You can check out past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts, or on our website at dga.org/podcast. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.